And just into our newsroom, some breaking news here. A 4.4 magnitude earthquake was just reported at 4:47 near Dover Air Force Base. The epicenter said to be in Dover, Delaware. You're looking now at, of course, the U.S. Geological Survey information. And, of course, we are monitoring this as it affects our area. The magnitude earthquake, 4.4 magnitude earthquake just now hitting in the Delaware Valley.
Yeah, a lot of folks turning to social media to report they felt the earth shake for a few seconds. It was a scary situation. We're following this story, a 4.4 magnitude earthquake in Dover. We, of course, will have the very latest for you on Action News coming up at 5 and at 6 o'clock tonight.
That's going to do it for Action News at 4. We are just getting an update.
5.1 magnitude.
5.1 magnitude earthquake. Okay, more to come, of course, on Action News. Now for Brian Taft, Rick Williams, Alicia Bittarelli, and Adam Joseph. I'm Shari Williams. Join me along with Brian, Adam, and Deuces Rogers tonight and every night for a full hour of Action News at 10 on PHL 17.
All right, Action News is coming up next with more on that breaking news story. Stay with us.
Action News, Delaware Valley's leading news program, with Jamie Apodi, meteorologist Cecily Tynan, Rick Williams, and Monica Malpass.
We begin with breaking news at this hour. If you felt the ground move just a few moments ago, you are not alone. The United States Geological Survey is confirming right now that there was a 5.1 magnitude earthquake centered near Dover, Delaware.
That's right. We don't know of any injuries yet or damage, but we do want to hear from you. If you have photos or video, please send it to us using the hashtag 6abc.com. And, of course, we'll post that. Some of us felt it in the newsroom. And let's get the latest from meteorologist Cecily Tynan.
You know, I was sitting in my weather office. I just finished a live chat and I actually felt it. I thought, did the building get hit by something? But there was really no noise. So felt a little bit of swaying. It's a 5.1. At first, the USGS, United States Geological Survey, said that it was a 4.4, but they revised it to a 5.1 magnitude earthquake 10 kilometers northeast of Dover, Delaware, near the Dover Air Force Base. We don't get a lot of earthquakes in this region, but we do have some fault lines, and we did have a little bit of shaking, and my Facebook, my Twitter account kind of blew up with people saying, did you feel that? Did you feel that? So that, again, was the epicenter. We're still getting some more details on just how deep the earthquake was, and we are still getting details in if anybody had any kind of damage or anything. 5.1 is pretty low on the Richter scale. People in California kind of laugh at stuff like this, but we don't get earthquakes in our region that often, so a lot of people have been calling about this. And obviously, the closer to Dover, Delaware you are, the more of the shaking you felt. We'll continue to get more information in and have the latest on Action News. Back to you guys.
All right, so just to repeat where it took place once again, we were 10 kilometers northeast of Dover, Delaware,
and 5.1 on the Richter scale, which is relatively low. The Richter scale, it's exponential. The higher the number, really, the much bigger it is. So 5.1, pretty low, but here in Philadelphia, we did feel it. So I think folks near Dover probably felt a lot more.
You mentioned that there are several fault lines under Pennsylvania. Can you tell us a little bit more about, this is historically a place that has had some fault lines, but they haven't been active the way they tend to be in California.
We don't have the fault lines like they do out in California that typically are very active, but we did have, what was it, 3 years ago?
Right.
That we had one, and a lot of people felt it, and so it's not that unusual that we do get the small earthquakes in our region, but we don't typically get the big ones, fortunately, that cause a lot of damage.
And that's good news.
But once again, 5.1 magnitude, which again is fairly low on this scale, but certainly it was enough for folks to feel some shaking, feel the ground move, and certainly they responded to social media tonight, and we'll share some of those messages throughout the evening. But thank you, meteorologist Cecily Tynan, for that update.
We have an update on our big story, an earthquake that hit our area at 4:30 this afternoon. A 4.4 level quake in Dover, Delaware was the epicenter, but a woman in Claymont, Delaware, that's about 40 minutes away, says she felt that earthquake. And we have Barbara Shepard on the phone right now. Good evening, Barbara. Tell us exactly what you felt.
Good evening, Monica. I had just come in through my garage, and I mean, the whole house shook. It was an awful tremor. I mean, terrible. And so I ran back outside, and all the neighbors were also out there, and everybody's saying, "What was that? What was that? What was that?" And so, you know, nobody knew. I came back in and texted my daughter, who works at the hospital in Kent, in Dover and asked her if she felt it, and she said yes, she thought it was they think it was an earthquake. At that time, I turned on Action News and heard Cecily talking about it.
All right. Well, sounds like you're okay, Barbara. Was there any damage to your home?
No, as far as I can see, Rick, there is no damage. Nothing fell off the wall or anything like that. The whole house just shook. I'm a little shaken up because I've never felt anything like that before. But nothing fell off the house. I guess tomorrow I'll go out and look around and see if there are any cracks or anything. But no pictures fell. Nothing fell out of the cabinets like that. It was just, it was bad.
Have you ever felt anything like that before? I don't know if the walls are shaking, the floor, or what you felt or saw.
That was even down here in the Clayton, Dover area. It's always windy. We get really bad thunderstorms, and the house will shake, but nothing like that.
All right. Well, Barbara, we're glad you were doing okay, and thank you for calling in. Once again, that earthquake was near Dover, Delaware, as you can tell from the screen there, 10 kilometers east-northeast of Dover, Delaware, 4.4 magnitude, somewhat of a low-level earthquake, but certainly enough for folks to react. And we are now hearing that there was no damage reported. According to Dover City Fire, they have not found any damage to that area yet, but again, they're continuing to look over that area and make sure everyone is doing okay. But again, it was the epicenter east-northeast of Dover, Delaware, just after 4:30 this afternoon. All right, back to our top story, that 4.4 magnitude earthquake near Dover, Delaware, just after 4:30 this afternoon. We want to go to the phones and speak with a state geologist, David Wunsch. David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right, thanks for joining us. What can you tell us more about what so many of us felt this afternoon, just almost an hour and 20 minutes ago?
Well, it was indeed an earthquake. I'm looking at some screens right now that are showing some of the information about it. It appears to have been centered just a few miles from Dover, Delaware, about 8 miles northeast. It occurred about 8.1 kilometers deep. We're looking at where it was felt, and it's interesting, the people that are reporting having felt this earthquake, it ranges all the way from Washington, D.C. up to Yonkers, New York, as of right now.
What causes the plates underneath our state, David, to start shifting? Did we get any sort of little tremors or warning signs, or why would it suddenly happen today, for example?
Well, that's interesting you asked that question because my colleague, the state geologist in Maryland, had some news here recently about a week or so ago where they had some small tremors in Maryland, not too far away as well. So we don't know if there's any relation to what we felt here today in Delaware or not, but it certainly piques the curiosity of scientists. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that the hits or where people have felt it the most kind of runs in a line. It does run, like I mentioned, from Washington up toward New York City, and it's not surprising because that's where kind of what we call the fall line, or where the Piedmont rocks are. These are the more dense, hard to erode rocks, and they tend to transmit the earthquake energy a lot better than kind of the coastal plain sediments, which are the flat, sandy type stuff we see as we go toward the beaches.
Right.
So, an interesting setup as of right now.
Okay, well, as you mentioned, from Washington, D.C. to Yonkers, New York, David, certainly rattled the entire East Coast. How common is something like this for it to be as widespread as it was this afternoon?
Well, anytime you have an earthquake of that magnitude, which I have most recently upgraded number was 5.1 from the USGS, but that's a preliminary number. They typically do continuing processing as more data comes in, and they can kind of get a better number that they will announce at some time. But, for example, the Virginia earthquake that happened a few years ago, that was also felt, actually, I think, even farther up along the coast. So, if you're going to have a magnitude of around 5, it's going to be spread or felt in a multi-state zone for sure.
Should people worry that there will be other tremors, or that this could just be the precursor of a really big one, the kind like we see out in California, which is not that common on the East Coast to have such a huge one that does damage and possibly, God forbid, could take lives? What do you think is the really tip of the iceberg here, or is this just an isolated event?
Too early to tell, but it's not likely that this was a precursor of a sudden increase in major seismicity. We're kind of in the middle of earthen plates here on the East Coast. They're not that active, but they are on continuously getting stressed and strained from basically the oceans are kind of still splitting us apart. So it tends to build up pressure in the rocks, way deep below us over long periods of time, and then every once in a while it has to release that energy in the form of an earthquake. Like I said, it's too hard to tell. Interestingly, the Delaware Geological Survey, which I direct, we played part of a national study where the National Science Foundation funded sensors that moved all the way across the country and probably took the biggest picture of our deep subsurface that's been done ever. And they're still processing that data, but hopefully that'll give us a better idea of what some of the geologic structures are at depth that we can't see or we can't even drill to, but we can infer from geophysics, which is much like taking an MRI of the Earth. It kind of gives you the deep layers and things you can't see, and that may shed a lot of information about what might be causing these earthquakes that we are finding on the East Coast.
Wonderful.
Right. Well, David, tell us, where in Delaware are you in relation to Dover, and if you felt anything when this occurred?
Interestingly, I'm the Delaware Geological Survey. We're located here on the University of Delaware's campus, in Central Campus area, and I was next door at the Geology Department listening to a seminar. And during the seminar, all of a sudden, the projector screen started swaying, and everything was moving around. And I looked at my colleagues, and I said, I think that was an earthquake, because I felt a few of them. I was also the state geologist of New Hampshire, where we also have seismic events. And so, indeed, the phones have been ringing off the hook ever since.
It's an unnerving feeling. I was actually in a small one once in Puerto Rico. I'm sure you've felt them, and you never forget it, do you? David Wunsch, thank you so much from the Delaware State Geology Department. We really appreciate your insight.
All right, closing in on 5:30. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with more news right after this.
Action News continues with meteorologist Adam Joseph, Jamie Apodi, Rick Williams, and Monica Malpass.
Hello again. We begin this half hour with breaking news. A 4.4 earthquake reported in our area, centered in Dover, Delaware. The quake centered just northeast of the Dover housing base. So far, no major damage has been reported. We want to get the latest now on exactly what happened from meteorologist Adam Joseph. Adam.
Yeah, Rick, it happened at 4:47 p.m. today, and social media, one of those powerful tools that lit up that this was something, because most people were talking about it the minute after it happened. At 4:47 p.m., the epicenter was 6.2 miles east-northeast of Dover. It was a 4.4 magnitude on the Richter scale, which is pretty impressive for our area. In fact, it is the largest earthquake ever felt in Dover in history. The last largest earthquake was a 3.8 magnitude in 1973. The depth of this earthquake was about 4 miles underneath the surface, so that is considered a very shallow earthquake, just much like the Virginia earthquake back 7 years ago. Now, if this earthquake was to be much deeper, okay, just getting a word again. It just changed to a 4.1 magnitude. Again, this will continue to shift with the Geological Survey team assessing what happened here. But even a 4.1 would still be the largest earthquake ever in the state of Delaware, with the depth of 4 miles deep. Again, that is very shallow. The deeper earthquakes tend to do less damage, because you think about those seismic waves that have to travel through the ground. They actually lose energy as they hit the surface. But even with this 4.1 near the surface, we're not getting many reports at this point of some damage. But as we take a look at Storm Tracker 6 Live 3D right now, here's where the epicenter was. There is Dover. Again, it's 6 miles to the north and east of there. Here it is on our map. Yes, there it is, confirming a 4.1 at this point. But this being felt, again, the shakes go all the way north to New York, all the way south down to Washington. In fact, this map here showing where we are getting reports in of feeling that ground shake. And you can see anywhere even north of New York City, some near Waterbury, Connecticut. The heart of it, the most, is in and around Philadelphia. Philadelphia down to Baltimore and Washington. Not seeing anything south of Dale City once you get into Virginia or Richmond, but at this point the epicenter definitely in the mid-Atlantic region from Wilmington towards Philadelphia, so something we continue to monitor and watch here. But again, as we take a look at what we are unfolding here, is learning much from the National Geological Survey here of that 4.1 magnitude earthquake that happened at 4:47 p.m. But again, we'll be learning much more of this as we progress through the evening hours and get much more, Rick, in just a little bit.
All right, Adam, we'll check back in momentarily. Thank you. Meanwhile, the last quake to be felt in our area was in August of 2011, and it was a 5.8 quake centered in Virginia. That quake centered in Louisa, Virginia. That's northwest of Richmond and 230 miles southwest of Philadelphia. That quake was a half-mile deep. Damage was reported throughout the East Coast, including shattered windows in Center City. Again, no word yet on damage from today's quake, but of course we'll be following it throughout the evening. We're also getting reports from viewers who felt the earthquake from Delaware to central Jersey to the Lehigh Valley. If you have any video of the tremor happening or want to share your experience, just post them to social media with the hashtag 6ABCAction. Of course, stay with Action News and 6ABC.com for the very latest on this quake that took place this afternoon. Monica.
In Philadelphia. Action News, Delaware Valley's leading news program, with Deuces Rogers, meteorologist Cecily Tynan, and Jim Gardner.
It is Thursday night, and the big story on Action News tonight is a 4.1 magnitude earthquake right here in the Delaware Valley. The quake hit at 4:47 this afternoon, with the epicenter 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles east-northeast of Dover, Delaware. We have had no reports of injury or damage, at least not to this moment, but we have heard from people feeling the quake from Washington, D.C. to Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Meteorologist Cecily Tynan has more on the quake.
And Jim, I felt it. I was getting ready for the 5 o'clock news, sitting in the weather office, and it was about 20 seconds of kind of swaying, and my Facebook, my Twitter accounts lit up with people saying, did we just have an earthquake? And yes, we did. The epicenter was close to Dover, Delaware, but the seismic waves felt across the region, even as far as New England, far south as Washington, D.C., because this was a pretty shallow hurricane. Officially, from the National USGS, it's a 4.1 earthquake. Did I call it a hurricane? Sorry. I'm thinking the end of hurricane season. It happened at 4:47. The epicenter was 6.2 miles east-northeast of Dover, 10K east-northeast of Dover, and it was an extremely shallow hurricane. It was only 5 miles below the surface. I said hurricane again. Earthquakes can be as low as 40 miles under the surface to still be considered a very shallow earthquake. It was the largest reported earthquake in Delaware in history. The last one, 1973, a 3.8 magnitude. Now, talking about magnitude, it's a logarithmic scale. So each level is 10 times stronger than the one before it. So 1 to 5 magnitude, it's felt, but damage is rare. You get to a 5 to 6 minimal damage, and then you get 6 and above. This is when it goes up to severe damage. The highest earthquake ever recorded, a 9.5. And these are all the reports. You see all those blue dots? These are the people who have felt the earthquake as far north as parts of Connecticut, New York State, as far south as Washington, D.C. But again, 4.1, minimal damage, just a lot of shaking and swaying. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Cecily. Let's go live to Action News reporter Sarah Bloomquist in Center City, Philadelphia. Sarah, apparently lots of people there felt the earth move.
Jim, it seems it's been very hit or miss where people felt this earthquake. We're not too far from Franklin Square here in Center City near police headquarters. We didn't feel anything. We went over to Franklin Square, talked to some people there, people walking down the street. They didn't feel anything here in Center City. I checked in with some people in Old City. They didn't feel it there either. This was a 4.1 on the Richter scale, and I do remember the earthquake that happened back in August of 2011. I was largely pregnant, quite pregnant at the time, and was in a news van, and it was swaying. And you remember in that case, people came running out of the buildings. Not the case today, at least here in Center City. A little bit different in South Philadelphia. We spoke with Ivan Cohen. He did feel the swaying. Here's what he tells Action News.
We're sitting here talking, me and my wife, and all of a sudden everything in the house was swaying to one side. I thought the house was falling. I didn't know what you usually feel the trucks going by. There was no trucks out here. All the Christmas decorations in the front window were shaking. Everything, all the lights were moving all over the place.
So very interesting. He's in South Philadelphia. We're not too far away here in Center City. He felt the swing, saw the decorations in the windows shaking, felt like a truck going by. People here where I'm standing don't know what I'm talking about. So it really mattered where you were. We know a lot of people did feel it, given the responses Cecily was talking about on social media. Live in Center City, I'm Sarah Bloomquist, Channel 6 Action News. Jim?
We were flooded with phone calls and social media communications. I've got David Wunsch on the phone. Mr. Wunsch is the state geologist for the state of Delaware. Mr. Wunsch, most people don't associate the tri-state area with earthquakes. In fact, the last earthquake near Dover was in the late 1800s. Why would something like this happen now?
Well, that's a good question, and certainly scientists will be looking with a bit more interest now in this earthquake occurring in this area, but they are somewhat random events here on the East Coast because we're not near some of the more active plate boundaries where we tend to find earthquakes. But that's not to say that the Earth is always under constant stress, and after so many years, decades, or millennia, that pressure builds up to where it has to be released, and it's usually in the form of an earthquake.
So the fact that we have had an earthquake this afternoon, does that mean we are more likely to have another one soon?
That's very difficult to say that that's indeed the case, because you really need to have records that go back millions of years to know what's normal and what's not. In the course of our lifetime, having one every 100 years is it's hard to kind of pick out a schedule or frequency from just kind of a random event like this.
Well, a quake of that relatively minor magnitude, what about aftershocks? Is it likely or not likely that a quake like this might have an aftershock or two?
Typically, they're more associated with larger quakes, but it's not to say that we couldn't have more smaller ones. They might be something that people may not feel, but our scientific instruments will pick up. Something like around a magnitude 1 is something that most people will not notice or feel in their homes, but our seismometers can pick those type of earthquakes up.
Mr. Wunsch, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
The last quake to be felt in our area, August 2011. It was a 5.8 quake centered in Virginia. That quake was centered in Louisa, Virginia, northwest of Richmond and 230 miles southwest of Philadelphia. That quake was a half-mile deep. Damage was reported throughout the East Coast, including shattered windows in Center City, Philadelphia. Again, no word yet on damage from today's earthquake, but of course we'll be following this story throughout the evening, and we urge you to stay with Action News and 6abc.com throughout the night for the latest on this Delaware